So we're going to now move on to how might we prepare ourselves for supervision and how can we resource ourselves to get the most out of the interaction. So I'm just going to share my screen a bit and think about preparing. And most of my thoughts here are inspired from another book that I'll share, Supervision in the Helping Profession. This is written by Peter Hawkins and Ailing McMahon. And they've taken various snippets from different people within supervision and different areas of supervision, from clinical supervision, coaching, mentoring supervision, etc. And they pose a number of questions. And in particular, what they ask or suggest rather, at regular intervals, it's beneficial to stand back and reflect on the supervision that you're receiving and consider what you will need in the future. You can then ask yourself, what are the blocks to supervision being more effective, and what can I do to initiate unblocking that process? And the areas perhaps that we need to consider are, what are your specific needs for supervision? So to what extent do you present your supervisory arrangements, and how are they actually being met? So have you got a clear agenda? Have you thought about the type of supervisor that you want to engage with? How long have you been with your current supervisor? Is it almost getting to a robotic stage where you meet once a quarter, once every couple of months, and not really sure where to talk? Or are you be able to really gain the most out of the interaction? So asking what are your specific needs from your supervisor is quite a healthy way to interact. And certainly over the years that I've been mentoring and coaching, I've probably stayed with one supervisor that's been a constant, but I've mixed and matched, and I've gone and changed supervisors from time to time, engaged other, and I've looked at different ways that could be delivered. So is it face-to-face? Sometimes a face-to-face interaction can be good. Other times it's great just to be able to link up and go online and do that interaction. And other times engaging in group supervision has served its purpose. But all in all, I think we can get stale if we stay too long with the same supervisor, or just engage with the one supervisor and not mix things up. And also, how do we know that actually we're getting the things that we want from that? What's the feedback mechanism that we're putting in place? And indeed, do you interact with your supervisor on the feedback that you're receiving and you're giving to that individual? So how do you reflect on the value of your supervision interaction, both before and after, so that you can mix and match and change and shake it up a little bit? And certainly the things that I enjoy getting from supervision are being stretched in different directions, of thinking about different areas that I want to concentrate on in that particular session. So maybe through my reflection, I've thought about a specific instance. So in this, we start looking at using Peter Hawkins's seven-eyed model within supervision. So it could just be, okay, how am I, as the coach or the mentor, interacting with my client? Is that fit in the circumstance? What's the wider thing? How is my supervision impacting on the more wider systemic effects of that relationship? So my supervisor with me as a coach or mentor will start delving and probing and looking at not just the interaction, but also the wider effect of who's in the room, who's not in the room, who's affected by the interactions that we're having. And all of these are really healthy things to discuss, either with your supervisor, with peers, and thinking about the right personality, what's the right fit for purpose at this point in time. So resourcing yourself for supervision is both an immediate thing, thinking about what you'd like to concentrate on at your next supervision session, and also what stage you're at in your professional development, and is that person able to give you the stimulation and the interaction that's required? Or is there an alternative provider that you might need to, on that occasion, reach out to and get some supervision from? So don't be afraid to think, don't be afraid to challenge, don't be afraid to think about what's fit for purpose in terms of your own interaction. So I think it's also worth considering about the supervision process. So about your preparation. Not only have you set up the session, but are you just diving straight in there for another meeting, or have you given yourself time 20, 30 minutes prior to meeting your supervisor to prepare yourself, to get in the right mental mind and attitude for that interaction? This can be quite difficult if we're doing it online, because we may tend to come from one meeting to another and not have that space to get in the right frame of mind. If we're traveling to a meeting, maybe that's the time you need to be able to reflect and think. Then there's the interaction itself. How's that serving? How's the stimulation working? Is it good, bad, indifferent? How well do we trust that supervisor? How are we getting on? Is it informative? Is it two-directional? How's it fit in serving its purpose? And then after the supervision, what's our activity post-supervision? Do we have time again to reflect immediately after? Or have we taken notes, and is there a time, maybe several hours after, where we go back and think about the interaction? And what about feedback? How do we interact with feedback and getting feedback from our supervisor, how we felt that went, and feedback that you're giving to your supervisor? Quite often what I've found useful is, certainly if I'm doing my supervision online, is to record the sessions, and from those recordings be able to, either a day or two later or even several weeks later, go back and review and watch and observe and listen and see what else I'm taking from that supervision session. So all of these are great ways to both prepare and also resource ourselves for our next interaction, whether it be with the same supervisor or an alternative provider. So that's about preparing and thinking about resourcing ourselves. And we're going to look into then, what do we take from that, and how do we take the reflection and interaction? And we'll look at that in our next session.